Hey, welcome everybody. I'm here with Sean McClain, who's the founder and CEO of Absci. Sean, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. I'm super stoked to be here. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Sean's got this incredible story. I can't wait to dig into it with you, Sean. But first, just a fun one to start. Who's that with you there in the background?
So this is my honey badger. So my wife says my spirit animal is a honey badger. And when we moved into our previous space during the grand opening, my wife presented me with literally this taxidermy honey badger. And she was like, I was walking down Mississippi in Portland with some friends, and I saw this in an oddity store, and she's like, I had to pick it up for you. And so I think it really represents me really well, even though I feel like it's very terrifying, which I don't feel like I am, but it's a very tenacious animal, which I feel like really embodies me in Abside.
Yeah, I mean, I won't make you bare your teeth like that in the time we have today. But okay, so I want to dig into all the story of you and Absci and how this all came to be. But before we dig into your background, just help us set context. What does Absci do today?
Yeah, great. So if we take a look at the biopharmaceutical drug discovery and biomanufacturing process, it's completely disjointed stepwise and has a couple key failure points that I attribute to taking years to go from idea to drug in the clinic. It's actually 5.5 years. And what we've done here at Absci is collapse that into a single step, eliminating those key failure points, which is allowing us to collapse the timelines from 5.5 years down to weeks or months. And not only that, we're enabling new classes of protein-based therapies to reach patients that previously have been unattainable. And our partners such as Merck and Astellas are really excited about our technology because they can now take the ideas that they've always had on how to make better protein-based therapies and make that a reality. And last but not least is the platform also enables massive COGS reductions for these protein-based therapies. So we're able to get better drugs to patients faster and lower the overall cost of them. And so how are we actually doing this? Well, we're merging synthetic biology and AI together. And one of the really exciting aspects of our technology is that we can screen billions of different protein-based drug candidates, looking at the functionality of them as well as the manufacturability. So the drug functionality and manufacturability, all in a single experiment, looking at billions of them at the same time versus screening tens of thousands, which is currently best practice within the industry. And so we're essentially feeding in all of this data into our deep learning models to allow us to ultimately get to the point where we can take patient samples, predict the target for that particular patient, for that disease, and then predict the absolute best protein-based candidate and the associated cell line to manufacture it, all literally at a click of a button. And so we like to think of this as the Google index search of drug discovery and biomanufacturing, ultimately getting and being able to predict the absolute best drug candidates for patients at a click of a button.
Okay, so that's where you are today. And I just want to go back to you growing up. So you grew up in the Portland area, right?
Yeah. I grew up just outside of Portland in Sherwood, Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about what your family life was like, what you were like as a kid. How did you spend your time, what you were interested in?
Yeah, so I was a super introverted kid. Most folks nowadays don't believe that I was extremely introverted. I loved science, and I actually had a big interest in chess when I was in elementary school. I'd wake up 7 a.m. every morning, went in and did chess club, and also grew up playing sports as well. My family was big into athletics, and so I adopted the science and mathematics side that really didn't exist in my family, and And so it was fun, being able to grow up, with sports as well as having a love for science and math.
Okay, I got to ask you just on chess, like any particular figure in chess whose play style you were related to?
That is a great question. I honestly, at the top of my head, I can't think of anybody's, style that I loved. A lot of it, at least recently is all played, on chess.com. So, there's some folks that I follow there that are pretty awesome, but.
And you guys still have a chessboard in the office, right?
We do. Yeah. Yeah. Right outside my office, I have a chessboard for whoever wants to come in and play in chess.
I'm pretty sure there's some old pictures from PayPal of like Peter Thiel playing blindfolded against like all the other executives in the company.
Yeah, it's really fun. We have chess tournaments from time to time, and the first chess tournament I totally got my ass kicked, and all of my my ELT team still makes fun of me to this day on it.
Okay, so as a kid, I mean, you're pretty focused, introverted, but also you're pretty entrepreneurial, right? You started a lawn mowing business, and yeah, tell us how that came to be, and just how you grew that.
Yeah, when I was around 10 years old, it was the summer, and I wanted to get a video game, and I went to my dad asking him to buy me a video game, and he's like, "Sean, you need to go get a job if you want to get that video game." And I was like, "Dad, I'm 10 years old. It's like, there's child labor laws. I can't go get a job." And he's like, "Well, it looks like your neighbors need their lawn mowed." And so I roll the lawnmower over to our neighbors, and I go very timidly and knock on the door, just, "Hi, my name's Sean McClain. Can I mow your lawn?" And they're like, "Oh, you're so adorable. Absolutely." And so I mowed the lawn, and I got the $10, and that was that adrenaline rush of stepping out and into fear, and and then accomplishing something and being able to mow that lawn, get the $10, like just that thrill and kind of that adrenaline was like, it really kind of like stuck with me. And I actually didn't even buy the video game that year. I saved up all of my money, and then subsequent years I started building out the lawn mowing business. And by the time I was 18, I had a whole full-blown lawn mowing business that actually paid for most of my college. And the one mistake that I made, though, looking back, was I had the opportunity to have my first acquisition, and I could have sold over my customer list to the local lawn mowing company, and I totally forgot to do that. So you live and you learn.
Yeah, well, maybe after Abside you can go back and correct some of those mistakes.
Yeah.
So you ended up going to college down in Arizona. Walk us through kind of where your head was at there. What were your interests as you were going into college?
Yeah, so I really loved math and physics, and I went in thinking I was going to major in engineering, mechanical engineering in particular. Wanted to design cars, and I ended up taking a intro class in both chemistry and biology, and just really fell in love with how we could engineer living organisms instead of like engineering, physical, physical products. And so it was like, it started to become like this fascination with synthetic biology, applying engineering like principles to biology, and in particular to actually make drugs and affect, humans and healthcare. And so I started, becoming really, really obsessed with it, and dove into the history of biotech. And if you looked at biotech and its history, it began with insulin. And insulin was being produced in E. coli, and this was Genentech. Genentech was the one commercializing insulin. They're making it in E. coli, and then the industry ended up shifting to monoclonal antibodies. And when they made the transition to monoclonal antibodies, they tried to produce it in an E. coli cell and ended up failing. And so they switched to mammalian cells or CHO cells. And by making the transition from E. coli to mammalian cells, the development times went up and the costs went up. And I knew that if we could engineer E. coli to be more mammalian-like, it'd be a huge game changer. And so I came up with this crazy idea on how to engineer E. coli to be more mammalian-like. And I graduated a year early from school. I moved back in with my parents, and bless her heart, I convinced my fiance to move in with my parents, and all of her paycheck was going to pay lab rent and lab supplies. And we got this 200 square foot basement lab in downtown Portland. And I spent 18 grueling months doing all this strain engineering and showing that we could indeed produce a monoclonal antibody in E. coli for the first time ever, which then allowed us to get our first large pharma partnership. And after success on that,
well, Sean, I want to let you get into the whole story, but there's so many remarkable things that happened there. We got to dive in a little bit more deeply. I mean, first of all, what 21-year-old thinks to themselves, I'm going to go start a biotech company? Like, where did that kind of confidence and ambition come from?
I think it really came back to the days of mowing lawns and me being introverted and like, doing door-to-door sales essentially. And it was like, well, if I can do that, and if I can also compete at a high level in wrestling as well, like, I've got to be able to do this as well. And I was like, look, I can go out and try this. And if I fail, like, I'm going to learn something great. And if I fail, I can always go back to, school, get my, MD, PhD. And this was, just a great learning opportunity. But if it's, successful, it could be a huge game changer. And it was like, I need to go and figure out, if this, idea actually has some legs. And all my friends thought I was absolutely crazy. They're like, Sean, you're going to do what? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm forgoing graduate school. Like, I'm gonna just graduate a year early and go do this. And they're like, okay, Sean, you go do that. Like, you're insane. Like, there's no way this thing's gonna work. And so, and I think it's just that stepping out and kind of what scares you and leaning into that. And I think just when you have a passion and you have that kind of just curiosity, it was like, I need to go for it and see what comes of it.
Yeah, but wouldn't you have thought there's some kind of like efficient market hypothesis here or something where it's like, what's the probability that the 21-year-old with like a couple of years of research experience under his belt will like arrive on a really new innovation in the field? Like, what was your kind of self-talk where, like, how did you test out people's kind of reception that you were doing something new or that you could be successful at it?
No, everyone told me, they're like, there's no way that like you're going to figure this out. And like, even if you do, figure it out, like, why hasn't pharma figured it out? So like, it must not be real. Like, and I think that there was just this determination and wanting to, show everyone that this was possible. And it was a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. It was like, look, I'm not supposed to be where I'm at today. I went to the University of Arizona. I wasn't, wasn't Ivy League, MIT, Stanford, and I didn't have a PhD. I was in, Portland, Oregon, of all places, not a biotech hub. And, we ended up, succeeding. And it's because we believed that we could actually make this a reality. And I surrounded myself with really bright people that had the same mindset that I had. And when you truly believe in the impossible, and when you believe that you're going to accomplish something, like, that's more than half the battle. I think like so many people think like this can't be done, and everything can be solved. It's just, how many problems do you have to solve before you solve the bigger problem at hand?
So, so you started off, as you mentioned there, you're in Portland. Certainly, many important companies being built there, but not a startup hub by any means, right? So, I guess what were you thinking there in terms of how you were starting? How did you find the community? How did you find your first funding? Like, how did and I guess what advice do you have for other people that maybe or do you think things have changed and now that things are more virtual, things are more accessible, even if you're not in one of the proverbial hubs?
Yeah. Well, back then things were not as virtual as they are today. And when I started, I always thought that we were actually going to relocate to one of the major hubs, just because the lack of funding of biotech was very small here, and then also there wasn't the talent that was needed to grow and scale an organization. And so from the get-go, I was like, once I'm out of my parents' house, have proof of concept, and we're ready to raise money, we're going to move to likely the Bay. And we ended up being able to raise capital as well as recruit talent to the area. And it's actually been a huge benefit for us, because right now the Bay Area and Boston, it's super expensive to live there. The cost of living is through the roof. And what our employees want, and I think this is true of most folks within the biotech industry, is that they want a great quality of life and the ability to work on really exciting technologies that are game changing. And and that's what we have to offer here in Portland, is a great cost of living. You've got the outdoors, you've got nature, and you get to work for a really exciting company that is changing the paradigm of drug discovery. And so it really turned into quite a benefit for us, and I think that really democratizing the synthetic biology outside of the major hubs, I think is super critical for it to continue to grow. And I encourage entrepreneurs to start the businesses where they want to be, and be in live in a place that inspires them, because you can make it work. It is a bit harder, but it can work.
Mechanically, when you were starting Absci, I mean, where did your first check come from, and how did you find your first lab space?
Yeah, so the first lab space came from the Portland State Business Accelerator. We had to. It was this accelerator space that was for startups within the community. You didn't need to be at Portland State University, but it was a program that you had to apply to. And so we applied and ended up getting accepted. Again, I think they were extremely skeptical that this thing was even going to work. And they ended up having these really nice labs that were built out on the second floor. And they were all taken up, but I couldn't have afforded them at the time. And they had this in the basement. They had this 200 square foot broom closet that was converted into a very low tech lab. And by low tech lab, I mean like wood lab benches with a garage sink that looked out into the garage of the Portland State Business Accelerator. And I was like, awesome, like rent's cheap, like we're going to make this our own. And went on, surplus auction houses and bought 1980s and 1990s, lab equipment to get this, to get things started. Cause that's all I could afford at the time. And my dad had originally given me $40,000 to buy the equipment that was needed. And once we ended up having the proof of concept that we could actually, show that we could produce an antibody in E. coli, we were able to get an angel investor to invest in the idea. And he knew nothing about biotech. It was actually a attorney that, was a good family friend that introduced us. And he invested in me. He had no idea what, this was going to come out of this. But apparently at the time, I was convincing enough. I've since learned that being able to communicate a clear story to investors and to just the general public is so important, and being able to, take the science, but then present it in a way that's going to connect emotionally with your audience is super important. I definitely didn't know that back then, but he still made that original bet on me. And, we ended up, I think the first check was, somewhere between like 75 and 100,000, ended up, raising a total of 300,000. And that allowed us to get our first large pharma partnership from that initial investment. And I knew that that's like what we needed. It was like, okay, we're off to the races. We have enough money to actually hire our first employee. And now we got to like figure out how do we get our first pharma partnership to then leverage that to go and get, VC, funding from there. Cause I knew, again, with where I had come from and, we were not going to get any sort of VC financing unless we had some sort of commercial proof that this, actually had legs and, pharma and biotech was interested in this.
So, I mean, at that point, I guess you had developed this SoluPro E. coli strain, right? This strain of E. coli used to produce antibodies. So, how did you discover the opportunity to grow beyond that initial vision? And I guess how has the platform grown since then?
Yeah. So the vision has always stayed the same of being able to get better drugs to patients faster. And we just continue to expand our offerings to continually see that vision through. And the original technology I developed is really just the seed that Absci has blossomed into. And we've hired amazing scientists and innovators that have continued to develop out our platform. And one of the next technology we had developed was our proprietary screening assays that allowed us to screen billions of different drug candidates, looking at the functionality and manufacturability, which that was one of the biggest breakthroughs we had, because the industry was screening in the tens of thousands. We were able to screen in the billions, and then we knew that data was super valuable, and we could leverage AI with that. And one would ask, well, why do you need AI when you're going from increasing the throughput from tens of thousands to billions? Well, if you look at an antibody sequence, there's more sequence variants in an antibody than there are atoms in the universe. And so what AI is allowing us to do is basically sift through all those different evolutionary paths and figure out what is the best variant, the best drug variant for a given target. And so we're feeding in all this data into our AI. And so at the time when we were looking to bring in the AI, we're like, well, we could build this or we could buy it. And we ended up having this partnership with a company called Denovium, really a pioneer in deep learning for protein engineering, and had some initial success off of that. And the way they built their models was perfectly matched the type of data that we had. And so we were like, look, it's going to be way faster to acquire Denovium, bring them on and build out the team than trying to build it ourselves. And the same thing was with Toshin. So we started again, cell line development, then we got into drug discovery, and then we're like, okay, well, to ultimately see the big vision through of really this personalized medicine, we got to also be able to find new targets to go after as well, because the industry is going after 10 to 15 targets total. We need to figure out ways to find new targets to go after for all these different diseases. And so we acquired this company Toshient that allowed us to really go fully integrated end to end, going from that kind of patient sample, finding the new target, drug discovery, cell line development, and so we've just continued to evolve the technology. We always have this mentality of build or buy it. do whatever is going to get us there the quickest. And the great thing too about, buying is that you also bring in amazing talent into the organization as well. So it's not only just the technology, but it's amazing talent coming in. And so we are always focused on our mission and our vision, and want to build out our company as rapidly as we can to see that vision through. And so we don't have this not invented here type of mentality.
Yeah, I think this mentality is something that I've seen a lot of people struggle with. Often, if you come from a technical background, you and that's the secret sauce of your company, then it feels almost blasphemous, right? To say, well, we'd rather bring in someone else than build it here. So yeah, any advice for people in terms of how to reconcile that feeling in themselves with also the ability to grow faster by teaming up?
Yeah, I think that, especially like my journey as a CEO, like, it was me on the bench, and now I, don't get to, be involved in much of the science as much anymore these days. And you kind of, evolve and grow as the company grows. And I think that, by doing that, like, you're not wedded to the original like technology. You're really wedded to seeing the company be successful in whatever way that is, whether that's acquiring new, bolt-on technology or doing new R&D. But I think that it's, I've just had the mentality of like, just hire amazing people and let them do what they do best. And if it fits in with the vision, and it has the, and it helps us get more business, quicker, then by all means, let's bring in, that company or acquire that company. And I would say, like, I've really just tried to throw my ego, to the side and say, look, I really ultimately at the day, I want to be the dumbest person at the company and have really extraordinary people under me that are really the ones, innovating and driving the science, forward.
I want to go back to and on just in terms of the subject of teaming up, right? You mentioned the point in Absci's journey where you landed your first pharma partnership and how catalytic that was for you. And since then, I know you've done many more. What advice, can you just walk through the story of how you landed that first partnership, even just the mechanics of it, right? Because a lot of people who are in a similar position today or will be soon and don't even know how to approach that process. How did you navigate the internal workings of pharma in order to get a deal done? Like, who do you know to talk to? Where do you find the contacts? What's the incentives on their side? Yeah. Walk us through the mechanics.
Yeah, so I was super naive. I had no idea how business development worked in pharma. I had no idea how like R&D worked within, pharma companies. And I had basically zero resources being in Portland, Oregon. So I couldn't go, across, and find my next door neighbor and ask them. And so that, so that really just taught me that, okay, I've got to figure this out on my own. And I just started going on every single, large pharma, website, and I reached out to, 100 different pharma and biotech companies. And I just emailed them. I said, hey, look, would you be interested in this technology that, could reduce, cost of goods and speed the time to market, and, with our E. coli, protein production, platform. And so I ended up having, I don't know, there's probably like two companies that actually reached back out and said, yeah, we'd be interested. And I remember distinctly, like, I was like, oh my gosh, they're interested. And this is like during the 18 months when I was like developing like the technology, and they're like, can you send me like a data package? And I'm like, crap, we don't have like the proof of concept yet. But I was like, yes, like we have someone that's interested. Like if we get this to work, like we can go back. So I said, hey, like early stages, we'll come back to you with like a data package here shortly. Yeah, it was like 18 months later. I was like, hey, do you remember me? Reached out to you like close to 2 years ago. Well, we had the data package and we, we presented that, and they're like, hey, this looks really interesting. And they wanted to really test how platform like the technology was, and they gave us 5 different proteins that represented their pipeline. It was a full-length antibody, FC fusion, Fab, insulin, and bovine growth hormone. And we ended up being successful on all 5 of those in terms of meeting their titer and quality metrics that they had set forth. And they had told us, like, we had never seen anybody be able to achieve the titer and quality metrics for all 5 of these molecules before. And they're interested in a bigger strategic partnership, and that's when I leveraged that to go raise my get my Series A, and that's the thing that I've learned along the way. It's like you got to go out and fundraise at the right opportune time. Like when you get a new partnership or new data, like use that as like the momentum to drive the investor interest. And always be looking to raise money. And even if you don't need money, you should always be looking to raise the next round. When those opportune times happen.
Yeah, definitely. Following the momentum that you've generated, right? And also maybe when you don't need it, right? This is the maxim, like don't raise money when you need it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a total mindset, change. When you don't need the money is the time that investors want to give you money.
Okay, so as on the trajectory for Absci, I know you had this like Mark Zuckerberg moment, right, where you had some acquisition interest, and you went to your investors and you're like, we're not going to sell. Like, walk us through that psychology after going through so much, all of this seems like such an amazing journey, right? And then still having the vision to, no, we're so much bigger than we are today, right? The vision's so much larger than we are today. Of course, I'm not going to sell. Like, what was the psychology there?
Yeah, so it was a few years back that the board wanted to explore M&A interest, and so we hired an investment banking firm to go out and kind of see what the interest level would be, and we kicked that off, and I ended up having to fly to Copenhagen to go to a conference, and during that conference, I ended up going on this like kind of bike tour, and I ended up falling over on my bike, hitting the top of my head, and I ended up breaking my T1 and T2 vertebrae in my neck.
Wow.
And the neurosurgeon said that I should have been paralyzed from the neck down. He's like, you're less than a millimeter away from your spinal cord, and it was like that time, like this sounds like terrible, but like breaking like my neck was like one of the best things for me, because it allowed me to like slow down and actually like have time to think about what I wanted as like an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and as a person. And like, did I want to continue to grow Abside, or like, did we want to, sell the company? And it was like right then and there that I was like, no, like there's something special here. And like, this is so much bigger than the acquisition offers that we have on the table. And this can be the next Google, and this could be $1 trillion company. And like, I want to see this through. And so I went back to my board and convinced them not to sell the company. and that we need to grow this and really see this vision through. And Zach Jonasson, who is the chair of my board and a personal mentor of mine and our first VC investor, he said, "Great, Sean. Like I 100% support you, and like let's go see this thing. Let's go see this thing through. If that's like your gut and your intuition, I trust I trust that founder intuition, and like let's go make this thing happen."
So at some point later, you end up going public. I think at that point you became probably the youngest CEO of a public biotech company. What surprised you about going public, and what do you think people maybe misunderstand now that you're on the other side of it about this important step in the life cycle of the company?
Yeah, so you want to go public with purpose, and and the reason why we decided to go public, and it was versus continuing to stay private, was talent. So we were really a stealth mode company that really wasn't on the map, and doing an IPO is one of the biggest marketing events that a company can have in its history, and it gives you a ton of credibility when you're out there recruiting, and so from that talent acquisition and retention standpoint, it was really critical for us and the growth trajectory we were on. We needed to hire faster than we've ever hired before, and so we wanted to have that credibility out there of us going public, and then also too, it gives you credibility from a business development standpoint as well, helping drive more business, and then on the private side, you never know when capital could dry up, and with the public markets, that you have continual access to capital, and so we knew that it took us 10 years to really lay the foundation, and we with going public, it's now allowing us to really build on that foundation and see the vision through over the next 10 years and setting us up for that success, and so I couldn't be more proud of what the team has built over the last 10 years, and looking forward, it's so exciting, the trajectory we're on, and there's pros and cons of being a public company, but it was 100% the right decision for us, and allowing us to see that vision through over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I'm gonna start taking some questions from the audience here. So people that are listening, feel free to start chiming in the chat here, and they'll get elevated up to me and Sean, and I can ask them here. But while we're waiting for some of those questions that come in, Sean, just maybe a couple more questions on kind of what it feels like to be at Abside today. So you guys just opened up a new facility.
Yeah, it is one of the most exciting times to be here at Absci. I mean, the energy that you feel when you come in here and the innovation that's going on is just so inspiring. When I go talk to, whether it's, business development, operations, or R&D, and I ask them what's going on. I mean, they're talking about really cool science or new partnerships that just really amaze me and make me want to work harder to continue to be a better CEO for them. And it's just it's a really humbling experience just to work with such great minds working towards solving really hard problems, and it's they truly embody our mantra and our core value, which is believe in the impossible. We have these hard problems we're looking to solve, and and all of them are we're going to figure this out, and they chip away at the problems, okay, this could be a solution. Oh no, it's not. How did we learn from that? And boom, and then it's And then they start coming up with these, I mean, really crazy things that end up start like working. And you're like, oh, wow, like I would have never even thought that. And so it's just an extraordinary culture that we have here, and just so much exciting work. And again, it's just that energy that you feel when you come in here is like, for me, it's like, it gets me going in the morning.
So a question coming in is about the transition. Actually, a lot of people have asked this about the transition. You're growing up self-described as a very like introverted person. You talked about knocking on doors and kind of stammering out your pitch to mow people's lawns and stuff. And now you're in a very public-facing role. You're public company CEO. Like, what's that transition been like in terms of learning how to communicate? What kind of advice do you have for people who are in the midst of that transition themselves?
Yeah, one of the biggest returns on investment that I've got for myself personally was hiring a speech coach. I actually hired David Greenberg a few years back, and he has taught me so much about storytelling and how to effectively communicate to investors, to employees, and how to overcome too the nervousness, the anxiety that can happen when you're when you're publicly speaking, and also too, he taught me about how to be me and how to be Sean McClain for everyone, and then take the exciting stuff we're doing here and be able to effectively communicate that. And I went from someone that was not that great at public speaking and effectively communicating to someone that is at least halfway decent at it now, with still a lot to learn, but getting those coaches in your life to make you a better person, and in this case a better speaker, a better communicator, and learning the importance of, it's not about what you say. No one remembers what you said. They remember how they felt. Everything is about human connection and connecting with people on that emotional level. And once you get them connected on that emotional level, you can always do a deep dive on the science as they go through the due diligence and everything. But you want that initial connection. And just everything that I've learned from David has just been so valuable for me.
Yeah, I think this is something that actually a lot of people have brought up. It's almost like, you look in Hollywood and it's like everyone's so, they're all ripped and like really attractive, whatever. And then you're like, oh, like, of course, these people have personal trainers, they have dietitians, they have, a lot of them got plastic surgery or whatever. It's like, you look at these, people who are, CEOs and they're expert communicators, great leaders or something. It's like, of course, because they've gone and they've sought out the best kind of mentorship and coaches that are working with them behind the scenes on all of those skills. And I think, as you said, about even with partnering or growth by acquisition, it's like you have to kind of escape this idea that you're going to fight all the battles yourself as much as you want to be this honey badger, right? And figures out everything. It's like, yeah, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay. It's great. It's a great idea to hire people that can mentor you, coach you, et cetera, leveraging your board members. I mean, talk a little bit more about that. Like you talked about your first investor, Zach Jonasson, who's still on the board today, from Phoenix Venture Partners, and the relationship you guys have. Like, what's that been like over the past 10 years, and how has it evolved, and how has Zach been a mentor to you over the course of your growth as a CEO?
Yeah, so I met Zach, I think it was about 7.5 years ago at a conference. I think it was Life Science Washington annual conference up in Seattle, Washington. And he had reached out because he sat on the Otrati Bioscience Incubator board, which was based in Portland. And we were one of the companies there, and he wanted to, get to know us a little bit better. And so we ended up meeting up. I met up with him, and I remember just looking at his background and like what he had done, and I was like, he's got the background and like the focus of his fund is kind of on biomanufacturing innovation. And so I was super nervous to like meet him. I was like, oh, like, and so I remember kind of going in there and I was like fumbling over my words, and, you know, I gave him this like pitch that was terrible. And I was like, I remember coming out of there, I was like, Sean, man, you blew that. Like, and I emailed him. I was like, hey, can we get on another call? Like, and I was like, and I remember like the first, like, the follow-up calls, like, do you mind like being my mentor? Like, I want to learn from you. You know, I was like, well, I've already like blown my pitch. I might as well just like see if he wants to like, you know, help me out. And he's like, yeah, Sean, like, what, you know, like, reach out anytime that, you know, you need help. And I was like, oh, perfect. And so like, I just continued to reach out to him. I'm like, you know, on the business development side, I'm like, hey, this large pharma is like wanting these terms, like what's standard? He's like, oh, let me pull in this person. And, you know, I think like you need to like, you know, like look at, you know, these terms. And so he was just super helpful. And like, he didn't ask for anything. He eventually started, he asked for some shares eventually, but he was just so helpful. And then when we, you know, went to go raise our Series A, you know, a year and a half later, you know, we had a term sheet on the table from another VC, and he's like, hey, Sean, like, I want to lead your Series A, like, and I want to, you know, help grow this. I want to help grow this with you. And I like, for me, like, bringing on an investor and a board member is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. They're going to be with you through thick and thin. And when things are going great, everyone's happy. But when things don't go well, you want someone in your corner that's going to be there to support you in the hard times. And I knew that with the relationship I had with Zach over that year and a half, he was going to be there in the trenches with us. And he really just ultimately, like, once we took the investment from Phoenix Venture Partners and Zach joined the board, he taught me what it meant to be a venture-backed CEO. And he gave me feedback and advice, but yet let me be, you know, Sean McClain, not a Zach Jonason, you know, CEO, but gave me the advice that I needed to help guide and steer me. And, you know, there's advice that I agreed with, I didn't, but he just really became that mentor to allow me what it, you know, to see what it meant to be that venture-backed CEO. And he's just been with me the last, you know, 7.5 years. We went public. Most of the time when, you know, you go public, VCs step down from the board. And I told, you know, Zach that, you know, I want him to stay on the board. And he's like, no, look, like our fund usually doesn't do this, but I'm staying on for as long as you want me. And those are the types of like board members that you want, and investors that you want, that are gonna like go the distance with you and help you become the best person you can be, the best CEO, and help make an extraordinary company. And I just can't put an emphasis on just how important it is to get that right, because I've seen what happens when you get it wrong, and it can be very painful.
I won't dig into that, but Mohammed asks, what parts of your day-to-day work in running the company has surprised and challenged you the most?
I would say it's the people. People are so dynamic, and just it's it's one thing to bring on technology and to create technology and to commercialize it, but to get the right people on the bus that can, you know, help you grow the company and that have the right cultural mindset is just so important. And I've learned so many like hard lessons with you know, people and you know what it means to hire the right phenotype and not, and like, you know, truly one bad apple that doesn't have the right isn't the right cultural fit can screw up the whole company. And so that is the big, and leadership, and, you know, people, leadership, like all of that, and culture, I guess, like they kind of all tie together. But that's the biggest thing I learned was I thought like if you have the technology, you're going to be successful. That is not the case. It's about having the right team, the right culture, and the right leadership in place to really drive a very successful company that can change the world. Because our biggest asset that we have here are the unlimiters. We call ourselves unlimiters here at Absci. Like are all the unlimiters that we have here. That is the greatest asset that we have. And it took me a little bit of time to understand that, but I understand it, and it's very clear to me that people, talent, and are everything.
So Trevor asks that Portland has had some big public biotech news recently with the Absci IPO and the new Twist facility in Wilsonville. Do you feel that Portland's or PDX's biotech sector is growing at the ground level? And are there more small startups there now too? Is there a community growing?
Oh, totally. I was so excited when, Emily announced that they're, building out their new facility here in the Portland metro area. And we do have a community building here, and especially like in Vancouver, Washington, there's so much support for biotech, biosciences. Governor Inslee gave us $200,000 to move from Portland to Vancouver, Washington, when we were 15 employees, and wow. Just to really spur the biotech industry on here, and I think that investment has paid off very well for the state. But the state and this area is like so supportive, and actually the Oregon Venture Fund and a lot of the investors here are starting to understand the bioscience area really well, and so there's more investment going into biotech, and I think as we continue to grow and Twist and others relocate here, there's going to be new startups that continue to emerge, and I think in an investor base that starts to get more and more educated here. So I think it's the ground level, but I see Portland being a true SynBio hub in the next 5 to 10 years.
So Sean, I want to let you get back to your busy day running Abside, but maybe one last thing to leave us with here. This summit is about founder-led biotechs, and Abside, of course, is like a tall figure, important company in this movement, in this community. So why are you here? Why did you feel like this was important to come here and talk to us?
Founder-led companies to me is like so important, and biotech. It's been so much of biotech's history has been bringing in experienced CEOs or executives to come in and take out the scientific founders and bring in quote unquote experienced management. And I think that a founder's intuition and a founder's perspective is so important, and I can't emphasize that enough. And I think that it allows you to think outside of the box and see things that others may not see. And there's also this fundamental what's the word I'm looking for? Just tied to your company that no one else but a founder can have, and you're willing to persevere through the hardest things because this is your baby. We are going to figure out a way to succeed, versus if you bring in someone that hadn't found the company, they can just jump ship and go to another, be a CEO at another company, and they don't have that innate passion and belief in the company, and that gets you through hard storms and allows you to come out the other end so much stronger. And so I am just a huge proponent of founder-led companies and actually starting that movement in biotech, because it hasn't been here, and what you all are doing here is exactly what is needed, and ultimately what that attributes to is brand new innovation, getting to patients and to healthcare and changing a world at a much faster pace than we've seen before.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a great note to end on here. So, Sean, awesome to spend time with you today. Thanks so much for taking out the time and telling us about your journey with Absci. It's been awesome to hang out with you.
Yeah, Tony, thanks so much for having me on today. And I'll end on this: believe in the impossible. Let's go change the world.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Sean. And thanks, everybody. Stay tuned. We got another panel on cell and gene therapies coming up right after this.